The day the soldiers surrounded the village, Chandra was exploring in the woods, her vent pack tapping against her back as she walked. She didn't notice them approaching the homes, didn't even hear the skyship descending. It was only when she heard the shouting that she ran back to the village and saw them. They wore the same uniforms as those who had stopped her in the restricted corridor back in Girapur. Weapons were affixed to their forearms, and many of them carried lit lanterns, despite it being the middle of the day. One of them was tall and confident, and spoke to the others in a hoarse whisper. Captain Baral. Somehow he had found them. The soldiers created a human fence around the village, crossing their arms and displaying their snap blades. One woman from the village shouted at them, and at Captain Baral's order, the soldiers shoved her back. Chandra's vent pack gave a puff of steam. She stamped out of the woods at them.
Hey, you looking for me? If you want me, here I am.
The soldiers looked at each other.
It's the Nalaga.
My name
She said, standing up to chest height.
is Chandra. Leave these people alone. They've done nothing wrong. Take me.
We will take you.
She had forgotten the way his low voice sounded like stones being ground to dust.
Because you and yours are a danger to yourself and to the public.
He turned to the woman and the other villagers.
You may go.
The villagers moved away, the adults ushering the children into their homes. Chandra scanned for her parents, but couldn't see them among the crowd.
I'm not a danger. Not anymore.
She swung her vent pack around for Baral to see. A constant trail of steam curled out of its vents.
Your very existence is a danger. Do you know how we found you, child? These people finally gave you up.
That's a lie. My parents said they were keeping us safe.
Your parents' crimes are many, but your crimes are far worse, Pyromancer. You're an instrument of chaos and death. How many people have you killed?
No one. I just broke some of your mass-produced toys.
Baral's mouth curled up at one edge, revealing his teeth.
That's not what I heard. I heard you were responsible for dozens of deaths in this very village.
He nodded to the other soldiers.
Do it.
The soldiers used their lanterns to light the thatched roofs of the village buildings. They caught fire immediately, spewing thick, ugly smoke.
No!
Impulsively, Chandra extended her arms to blast them with fire, but nothing emerged. Steam sizzled from her vent pack. Brawl smiled, and something glimmered in his eyes.
Chandra!
Her father came running from around the building.
Chandra, run! This way!
He hurled a small copper orb onto the ground at the soldiers' feet. It exploded in a blast of light, spraying their faces with glimmering motes. They moaned and clapped their hands over their eyes. Chandra ran into the village, her father close behind. She raced between the dwellings of the village, now consumed with fire and screams. Smoke rolled through the dirt pathways, cloaking the way back to the building where her family had been staying. She barreled ahead, trying to keep an eye on where her father was. When she emerged from the smoke, she was on the opposite side of the village. Fire blazed tall, consuming entire buildings. People staggered out of the village, shrieking, rolling in the dirt to put themselves out. Baral's soldiers stood by, doing nothing to help the victims. This would be blamed on her. she realized. She was the one who scared the woodland beasts with her fire, and so some villagers must have contacted Captain Brawl. And now all this fiery death would be on her hands, because she was the pyromancer. She had been tricked so easily, and Brawl had all but stated it right to her face. The soldiers caught sight of her. She turned to run the other way, but she slipped on something and fell. Her foot had caught on a slippery piece of fabric, trampled in the dirt. She took it in her hands. It was her mother's shawl, the one she always wore around her, with its characteristic embroidery. It was smoking and singed from fire. She realized she was in front of the dwelling where they were staying, and it was consumed in the fire.
Mother!
She yelled, suddenly unable to get up and run again.
No!
The soldiers deployed the razor-sharp blades at their forearms. They parted to let Captain Brawl approach her. He had a simple dagger in his hand and towered over her. She couldn't force herself to move.
The arena will have an excellent show. The consuls enjoy making an example of dissonance, and the crowds enjoy shows of force when it doesn't involve them.
Her father appeared out of the village smoke. He shoved himself between them, wedging himself between Chandra and the soldiers.
Enough! Take me. I'm the one you want. I yield.
Brawl approached her father, put one hand on his shoulder, and stabbed him through the gut with a dagger. Her father gasped and crumpled, falling to his knees, holding his stomach in his hands. He glanced at Chandra for a moment, and she saw his last emotion in his eyes. Not fear, but disappointment that he couldn't do better for her. He bent over, shuddering, and fell to the ground. Chandra didn't hear the sound she made at that moment. The world became enveloped in steam and smoke, and the uniforms of soldiers. She didn't feel the clink of cuffs around her wrists, the dainty loops of copper filigree that held like heavy iron. She didn't feel the vent pack blasting steam. She didn't feel herself being walked to the skyship, stepping over the threshold and put in her seat, gripping her mother's shawl. And she didn't see the plumes of smoke trailing away from the village as the skyship rose and turned its nose towards Girpur. She only saw her father, crumpling down into the mud, over and over again, and heard the disheartened sigh of his final breath leaking out of him. The executioner was tall and broad. His face was hidden by a hood with a filigree mask. More relevant to Chandra's situation was that his forearm ended in a massive cutting blade. It may have been fitted over a hand, but to Chandra, it looked grafted on, fused into the entire deadly costume of the executioner's role. He walked in a circle around Chandra, tracing the perimeter of the central dais of the arena. It was the Akra, The same courtyard Chandra had cut across when making her failed delivery only a few weeks ago. Now the stands were filled with people gathered to watch the grim spectacle. She looked down at the delicate cuffs that held her wrists firmly in place. Her hands didn't look like the weapons of a pyromancer, but like an ordinary child's hands. The squat announcer in a silk robe read her sentence in a booming voice.
For crimes against the public good, destruction of the honored foundry of Giripur, and for the deaths of 3 people in the village of Bonarat, this citizen has been sentenced to meet the blade of justice.
As he read, Chandra tried to muster her fire, but it didn't come to her. She could feel something pressing down on her, dulling any fire she could muster. She still wore the vent pack on her back, now resting just above her mother's shawl. The pack wasn't hissing. Her rage was gone, along with her father. Chandra scanned the crowd for any sign of her mother. If she were alive, she would doubtless be here, trying to stop this, trying to save her daughter. But nothing stopped the announcer's speech, which made it clear to Chandra her mother must be dead as well. She had nothing left. Maybe it was only right the executioner take her life.
Today we all learn a difficult lesson about the limits of compassion and the importance of vigilance. Today we learn that, for some, no amount of direction, no amount of moral guidance can be enough. Some are born with destruction built into them, and for the good of us all, these must be eliminated.
Maybe she wasn't meant to go on. Maybe she was never meant to be the best at anything. Maybe she was just a freak after all, a monster with a gift that could only cause those around her pain. Maybe no one could trust her, could love her for who she was. Maybe she should just lower her head and accept her fate. Something in the crowd caught her eye. It was Miss Pashiri, her contact from the foundry. Miss Pashiri nodded to her from the crowd, her mouth a thin, taut line, her eyes glazed with defiant tears. Slowly, Miss Pashiri raised her hand. Her fingers closed into a circle by her forehead. The Nalar signal, like a pantomime of her father's welding goggles, performed like a salute. Chandra's fists squeezed. The vent pack hissed, then whistled like a tea kettle. She kept her eyes held on Miss Bashiri. That gesture, that respect for who she was. She was a Nalar. She was Chandra Nalar.
This citizen's continued existence endangers us all. So, for the sake of us all, she meets the demands of justice. Blade bearer, please step forward.
As the executioner took 3 ritualized steps towards Chandra, the blade slid out from his arm, doubling its deadly length. Chandra's whole body tensed. The vent pack's whistling turned to a sputter as something boiled within her. The executioner leaned his masked face close to Chandra's.
I know you're trying, pyromancer.
Chandra tore her eyes away from Miss Pashiri and looked directly into his mask. Her teeth gritted. She knew the voice instantly.
Baral.
She could see Baral's eyes through the filigree of the mask, and his glare was utterly cold. She could feel the weight of his presence on her, the pressure of his anti-magic.
You and I aren't the only mages this world has seen, but I'll be the last you'll ever know.
He tilted back from her slowly, letting the blade swing out and up for all the crowd to see. Chandra focused on Miss Pashiri in the crowd. The old lady never lowered her hand. Chandra's wrists strained at the restraints, but she couldn't move. This was her final moment. Baral raised the blade high. Chandra heard the announcer give the order.
Swing!
Every one of her muscles tensed. She reached inside, grasping for something, anything, and she found the fiery moth, its bright wings fluttering. It was a tiny but rebellious source of light. Undeterred, undoused, it was her, she realized, a manifestation of her gifts, but also a manifestation of herself. She was her fire, and her fire was her. She felt a tiny part of what it meant to be a pyromancer, what it meant to be alive, what it meant to be Chandra. In a slow instant, the blade arced down through the air toward her neck. Chandra felt the prickling sensation wash over her like a wave of coals. Her vision flickered at the edges, blurring out Baral and the announcer and everything around her. The arena and the crowd warped in a molten haze. She felt the sputtering steam from her vent pack turn to white-hot liquid, barely aware that the pack had melted into slag and was dripping down her leg and burning through the stone dais. Her hands caught fire, flash melting the restraints. Her arms caught fire. Her shoulders and torso caught fire. She turned her face away, but the flames spread up her face. Her hair became a blaze of incandescence. Her eyes roasted, becoming red-hot orbs in their sockets. She uttered a scream of fury, and the scream became an explosion. A cascade of fire blasted out from her, enveloping the dais, enveloping her captors, enveloping the entire world. Everything she could perceive was bathed in fire. She held her flaming arms over her flaming head and squeezed her flaming eyes shut tight. Her ears rang, deafened and roaring at once. A moment or an eternity passed. One moment she thought she heard the screams of Baral, and the next she had the sensation of being blown out like a candle, or of rushing through a tornado and coming out the other side. When she opened her eyes, the smoke from her blast still cloaked the world around her. Her clothes fumed, and her vent pack was gone. When she heard voices of people approaching her, she readied more fire, preparing to throw it at her captors once again. The fire came to her readily, like a trusted ally. The smoke cleared enough for her to see the people who approached her. They didn't look like consul's enforcers, or like anyone she had ever known. Tall and noble, robed like monks, with ash streaked on their faces like ornate masks. Behind them rose a hilltop of roughly sculpted rock, with stairs leading up to a monumental archway leading into the mountain. Craggy stone architecture bloomed from the mountain, lit by brazierless trails of fire, and the air smelled of hot gases and baking earth. The arena was nowhere to be found. The entire city, her entire world, had abandoned her. Or she had abandoned it. Chandra sputtered in terror. The monks reached out their hands to her in a calming gesture, and one of them said something in a soothing tone. So she summoned up her will and blasted all of them with fire. Fire logic. Somehow, though, the raging funnel of flame did not harm them. One of the monks raised his hand, and her fire subsided, attenuating and becoming a warm, glowing ring that encircled her and them together. The monk nodded to her. "Greetings, pyromancer. You are welcome here." We truly hope that you enjoyed the last part of Fire Logic. The story was written by Doug Baer. He is well known in the magic community for his many stories based around Chandra, and I will be talking about a few of his other stories in my lore breakdown video that will be coming out next Thursday, if everything goes to plan. We have loved this journey and are so excited for what is next. So, what is next? Well, first, a full-length feature of Fire Logic, remastered with better audio mixing using the techniques I have learned throughout this month. Second, a lore breakdown video on Chandra Nalaar and who she is exactly, and why this story is so important to hers. Third, there will be 2 other videos. The first on my predictions for the Throne of Eldrin set, which I'm truly expecting a 1% success rate, so tune in to find out what I personally think is coming. And second, a video put out by the voice actress for Chandra herself, my lovely wife. She will be breaking down the Japanese War of the Spark art and talking about their creators, the art styles used, and the incredible story that was told through them. Now here's where I have to take a second to burst with happiness. When we started this channel, we wanted to be a fun passion project, something we could do to bring our love of magic to the world. We never expected that in just under 3 weeks, we would be so close to 30 subscribers. And we want to thank each and every person who has subscribed so far. We hope that you keep coming back for our content as we continue to grow and shape into the channel that we were meant to be. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. And we would love it if you communicated with us. If it wasn't for 2 incredible Reddit communities, I don't think I would be in the place I am now with how these videos are sounding and looking. I want to continue to grow, so please leave us a comment on what you liked and what you think could be done just a little better. The only way for us to grow is if you guys tell us what you would like to see. If you are new to this channel, well, please subscribe so that you can see all the new content that is coming out in the very near future. Let's see if 50 subscribers by the end of the month is insanity. Or maybe it isn't. And as always, seek on.